So we want to talk about managing crops all season long for best yields. Dean mentioned this morning, and I think this fact surprises a lot of people. 50% of corn and soybean yields are made in the last 30 days before maturity. Half your yield in the last 30 days. You know, I think guys look at a corn crop, it's tasseled, it's pollinated, you know, went from a seed to 10 feet tall, and think, wow, I've got it made. But if that crop dies right after it's pollinated, how much yield do you have? None. You couldn't harvest it. Kernels would be nothing. So obviously you've got a ways to go. You know, you've got the factory in place, but if you really want to get the full benefit, you have to keep that factory operating. Dr. Heininger talked about one of the things we can do is increase kernel size. It makes a big difference if it takes 60,000 kernels of corn to make a bushel versus 90,000. So a lot of that has to do with plant health. This is a chart from Pioneer showing the yield loss at a quarter milk line. So we can give up as much as 22% yields if the corn were to die when the milk line's at a quarter of the way down. And at that stage, you've probably got 2.5 to 3 weeks before maturity. If the milk line is halfway down, it can still be a 10% yield loss. And at that stage, you're probably somewhere 10 days to 2 weeks for maturity. So again, just verifying that premature death causes yield loss. Premature death can cause up to 25% or greater yield loss, depending on when it happens. What can cause the plant to die prematurely? Nutrient deficiencies, you know, it runs out of nitrogen, it runs out of potassium. And I'm sure you've all seen examples of that where it costs yield. Crop diseases, we've seen that too. You know, gray leaf, tar spot, northern leaf corn leaf blight, charcoal rot in soybeans, whatever. Insects, lack of moisture. We've certainly seen the impacts of drought and causing it to cause the crop to die early. Heat stress is the same. And of course, frost. If you have a killing frost, it's going to die prematurely. So what are some things that we can do to prevent the plants from dying prematurely? One is maintain soil tilth. You know, we've talked about soil tilth a lot today. It changes water infiltration, storage, and movement. So if we have good tilth all through the season, hopefully we have better water availability to the plant. It keeps soils aerobic, so that favors the beneficial microbes, so that hopefully then we don't get soil-borne diseases impacting the plant, and also we have that nutrient cycling. And so that allows the plant to have a better nutrient status. I think I'm too close to the speaker. Maintain available carbon and energy cycling in the soil. We need an adequate plant nutrition so the plant's continuing to pump out root exudates to feed the microbes, which in turn feed the plant. A 3-week corn plant has put 40% of its dry matter production out its roots. Think about that, 40% of it's going out the roots. That's not just to the roots, but it's actually leaking out. Corn plants have the ability to capture in excess of 6,000 pounds of carbon per acre. And up to 40% of that can leave the plant as root exudates to feed microbes. So I raised the question, do we need sugar in our fertility programs? And personally, I'm a proponent of adding sugar. Every trip across the field, if you're putting fertilizer on, put sugar with it. But we can't replace 2,400 pounds of carbon that the plant's supposed to put out by putting sugar out. We need a little bit of sugar to prime the pump, to keep the plant active, to keep the microbes active. But for the most part, our sugar and carbon that the microbes need is going to be supplied by the plant. Another way of preventing plant death is maintain active soil biology throughout the season. Do we have the right biology in the soil and on your plants? And one way to make sure that we do is supply biology multiple times through the growing season. Another way to prevent premature death, maintain adequate plant nutrition all season long. So one way to do that is to spoon feed the plant. You know, we don't eat just once a week or once a month. We eat continually, and it's just more efficient that way. Plants like continuous meals too. So I want to expand on this idea that the plant needs nutrition to pump out root exudants to feed the crop. This is actually slides of aerobic plate counts done on soil, and it was done on a farm that had very low potassium numbers. The base saturations were 1%. The potassium was so low that it was having a very negative impact on corn yields, corn and bean yields. And so we did a potassium test plot there. We ran two rates of potassium chloride, 415 pounds per acre and 830 pounds per acre. We also ran two rates of potassium sulfate, 250 pounds per acre and 500 pounds per acre. Now, you would think if you put out 830 pounds of potassium chloride, that'd be enough chloride to kill all the bacteria, wouldn't you? But look, here's the control, the aerobic bacteria number, 200,000. 830 pounds of potassium chloride, we were at 600,000. So our aerobic or beneficial bacteria actually went up under the higher rate. And with the potassium sulfate, it was higher yet. So what do we learn from that? I'll tell you. When we dug corn plants that summer, if we went to the control, we were digging up bare white roots on that corn. That plant didn't have enough energy to put out any root exudates to feed the microbes. That's why these numbers are so low. That plant was just struggling due to a lack of potassium. Potassium is responsible for over 40 enzyme functions within the plant, and it just couldn't function being that low in potassium. So fertility does matter. So we talked about spoon. Yes. Oh boy, somewhere back in the archives, it made a significant difference. Because again, it was so low in potassium that it wasn't yielding well. So we got big responses on all the rates. Yeah, I don't know if we could dig that up. That's 25 years old. So. So we talked about spoon feeding the crop, and one way to do that is side dressing. You know, that's common in corn to split your nitrogen up, but there's a lot of other nutrients that are soluble in the soil and tend to leach out. So we like to put those on too: potassium, sulfur, boron, other micronutrients that we might be short. And then we like to put carbons with it: humic acids, fish, sugars. That helps make better use of the nutrients. It feeds the microbes. It holds the nutrients in the profile better. Get better uptake by the plant. And here's one reason why side dressing is effective. If you look at your major nutrients and your micronutrients, this shows the uptake graph. And essentially on corn, it starts right at that rapid growth phase. That's when we need all the nutrients. So it doesn't make sense to put it on way early or the fall before. Put it on closer to when the plant needs it. Soybeans, that the grass look just like that, and it happens at flowering. That's when the nutrient begins really take off. Another way to spoon feed the crop is foliar feeding. When might it pay to foliar feed? Well, it helps to maintain healthy crops. It's a way to overcome nutrient deficiencies or tie-ups. When we talk about tie-up, it might be due to pH problems. Something like manganese that gets tied up in high pH soils, we can foliar feed it, bypass the soil. We see good response when the plant's under stress. It was mentioned earlier, getting huge responses foliaring when it's dry. You think about it, if it's dry, the plant isn't getting near as much nutrients out of the soil as it needs. So a foliar application can help bridge that gap. You need to push growth quickly. That could be late planting. You've got a challenge to get that crop mature before it frosts. And then, for managing disease or pests, we can put some nutrition on it at the same time. Another case where it might pay if you've got poor soil tilth and a poor root system, maybe you had to plant in less than ideal conditions, so your roots are restricted. Another case where foliar might really be beneficial. How do foliars work? You think about it, how can you put on such a small amount of nutrient and expect to make much of a difference? And I think the main thing it does is stimulates the plant, which then produces root exudates, and it feeds the microbes that feed the plant. So really, we're stimulating soil activity. Again, do we need sugar? We can't replace all the sugar that the plant needs, or we can't buy it and put it out there. But again, we're priming the pump. The plant can use sugar directly, and it can help raise the Brix level of the plant. So there's just a lot of benefits to putting a little bit of sugar on. We like to put an adjuvant with it so we get good penetration and good uptake of the nutrients in the foliar. One that we've worked with a lot for several years is an orange oil adjuvant, Boost made by Oro Agri. That's one that's allowed for organic. One of the unique things about this product, it has what they call transflow technology, where it allows the foliar to channel in through the leaf. It doesn't burn in, but it channels in, takes the nutrients with it, so you get better uptake. Mike talked a lot today about the potassium battery, the plant's ability to store potassium and use it later in the season. Well, sometimes that battery runs down and we need to recharge it, especially in times of drought or, stress times, and really anytime the plant's in reproductive mode, it's under some form of stress. So doing a foliar or late in-season applications of potassium can keep that battery charged and keep things going. So if we're looking at soil applications, the products that we've used the most are potassium thiosulfate, 0025 potassium, 17 sulfur. That is not organic, but with that, each gallon has 3 pounds of potassium and 2 pounds of sulfur. And then organic growers were primarily using K-sulfate solution, potassium sulfate. In foliar applications, we work with this Agri-K Plus product for several years now, and we really like it. I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. And then organic growers are primarily using the potassium sulfate again. Very effective in foliars. One other form of in-season applications can be string jets. They're largely developed for top dressing nitrogen on wheat, or you could do it later in the season. And say you've got these string jets with 3 nozzles and they're every 20 inches. Essentially, you're putting a stream of fertilizer down about every 6 or 7 inches. And you're keeping a lot of the material off the plant so you don't get burned from like 28% nitrogen or other salty fertilizers. But you can run higher rates of fertility in growing crops. And we've had guys that have had some real success doing that in soybeans. They'll put this on about R1. And again, the KTS is kind of the heart of the program. We're focusing on potassium, trying to charge that potassium battery. But some guys, that's their only fertility for the year. So they might run a phosphorus starter, some micronutrients, humic acid or sugar in there, and then biology too. And we've seen guys get in side-by-side comparisons as much as 15 bushel per acre increase over doing nothing with this kind of a program. I mentioned the Agri-K Plus. It's a 3-5-15 with micronutrients in it. One of the things that make it unique is most of the potassium is in the form of potassium acetate. And that's a highly available potassium source, especially in a foliar. This is showing the foliar uptake 48 hours after application. It's showing that nearly 50% of potassium in the form of potassium acetate is taken in by the plant. And all the other ones are less than 10%. You got potassium thiosulfate, chloride, sulfate, sulfite, and nitrate. That's essentially all the potassium products. I guess it doesn't have potassium hydroxide. Other than that, we've got them all up here. One thing we noticed working with the Agri-K product, working with produce growers, growing tomatoes and peppers and so on. For years, we had guys using a 3-18-18 base product, and they did well growing tomatoes and peppers and so on. But when we switched to the Agri-K, every single grower said, I'm getting bigger tomatoes than I did before. That tells me we're doing a better job of getting potassium in the plant because we have a more available form. Another product that we've worked with, Dr. Heininger talked about it, the Blue N or Nutrition N. Blue N is developed by Symborg from Spain. And then 2 or 3 years ago, Corteva or Pioneer bought the rights to market it in North America. So it's the same product, different name. I think this year it may all be marketed under the nutrition name, but it's an endophyte, which means it's an organism, one single organism that lives within the plant, but it gives the plant the ability to fix nitrogen. And it can fix up to 40 pounds of nitrogen per acre. Goes on at 5 ounces per acre, and it's meant to be foliar applied. Corn B4 to B8 is the target stage. Before flag leaf on small grains, Soybeans, they kind of moved it from B4 to B8 to around R1. And, we know that soybeans can fix their own nitrogen, but think about it, if you're in a high yield environment, and it doesn't necessarily have to be high, but a lot of soils can keep up to produce enough nitrogen to grow 60 bushel beans. What about 80 bushel beans? Sometimes nitrogen could be a limiting factor there. So it's good on soybeans, dry beans, grasses, pastures, things like that. Here's some yield data on organic wheat at Greenville, Ohio. Got about a 9 bushel increase, and that was on top of some pretty good wheat yields. Went from 84 to almost 93. And then here's a plot Derek Davis had 2 years ago, I think. The check made 45 bushels of soybeans where he put blue N on, got another 3 bushels where he put blue N on with K sulfate and molasses, almost 15 bushels. So I think we've got a couple things working there. We've got this molasses to kind of help feed the microbe, maybe get the organism in the blue N established a little better. And maybe we primed that potassium battery a little bit, gave it a little bit of recharge. But anyhow, that combination, he saw nearly a 15 bushel increase. So the bottom line is, don't give up on your crop. We need to manage it to the end to make the most money.